Welcome to the Josh Huisman Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 40 of the podcast. And I'm going to tell you what, we have an outstanding guest in the studio today, someone who has a story that you need to hear because there was a life-changing event that happened in Justin Moseley's life, and he has used it to really help people make big changes. And it started with himself, but I'm telling you, I am really looking forward to having him share his story. So his name is Dr. Justin Moseley. He is the Mindset Doctor. And thank you so much for being here today, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to having you on here for quite a while. I first heard you on Nick Heider's podcast called The Hit Streak, where you shared your story, found out about what you're doing in your podcast and how you're helping people with helping them fix their mindset and achieve goals, reach new heights, make changes, a lot of stuff that is really uncomfortable, but it takes work, and you're helping people do it.
Yeah, and I think, to put it simply, if you change your mind, you can change your life. And I've seen it from my own life and all the work that I did in my own mindset and what it's led to today. And we'll talk about the life-changing accident that I had. But from that point on, I kind of looked back at my life and said, what have I been through that I can use to help other people?
Yeah, I think it might be good to just from the start go into what took place. And I don't want to steal your story, but let me just say, so you were working as a chiropractic doctor.
Yep. Yeah, my wife and I are both chiropractors, and we still have a clinic outside of Nashville, Tennessee here. And we had built a great practice, and life was good. Money was good. Relationship was good. Just kind of going through the motions of life and helping people, making a difference in our clinic. And then I went on a men's retreat, and we went whitewater rafting, and I was sitting on the back of the raft. And we hit the class 5 rapids, and our raft tipped over. And it was just a freak accident. Me sitting in the back, I got trapped underneath the rapid itself, and it started pushing me underwater. And I still remember the sound of my helmet scraping down the rocks as I was being pushed under. And the last thing I remember thinking is, I'm not coming back up. And everything went black, and then everything went bright white. And it was the most peaceful, serene feeling I'd ever felt. And all of a sudden, I hear this voice that said, wake up. And thankfully, I did, because I came back to consciousness, and I was trapped underwater, wedged between 2 rocks. And one of the buckles of my life jacket got caught under the rocks. And I tried to push, and I didn't budge. And I pushed, and I pushed. Thankfully, my adrenaline kicked in, and I was able to push hard enough that I broke that buckle on my life jacket, was able to float to the top and gasp for breath, and then I got swept down the river. And at that point, I was rocked. I mean, when you go through something like that, or somebody who's been through a car accident, it rocks you. And I remember thinking, well, we all question our purpose in life. Why are we here? But I remember after that thinking, why am I still here? Because things could have been different in that moment. What if I didn't hear wake up?
Yeah.
Or what if I wasn't strong enough to break free? So why am I still here? Because God's got me here for a reason. And I think that's a question anybody can ask, because life's not a gift. It's not guaranteed. You didn't have to wake up today, but you did. There's air in your lungs. Your heart is beating. You woke up today for a reason. So asking yourself that question, why am I still here, is a very powerful question to ask yourself. And so from that day forward, I mean, there's multiple lessons I got from that accident, but one was the fact that I had gotten comfortable because I was living my purpose. I was helping people. I was making a difference, but God showed me that I was playing way too small. And I was making a difference locally in our clinic, but he showed me, you're going to make a difference all over the world. And I realized if I truly wanted to step into the calling that God had in my life, I needed to exchange my comfort for my calling. And that's been my message to help lots of others, because I think we do get comfortable. We go through the routine in life, and we start to accept that this is all that God has for me, when a lot of times, no, we set our own limiting beliefs. And there's so much more that we can and we do accomplish with him, but we've got to exchange our comfort for our calling.
Yeah, and it took an extreme event to kind of jar you.
The wake-up call.
The wake-up call. Crazy. I'm sure that church canceled all future men's retreats to the river.
Well, no, it was crazy. Nobody even knew it happened.
Really?
Because it was in the Ocoee here in East Tennessee.
Okay.
But there were so many people that day going down the rapids, and it was like a scene from NASCAR. There was hundreds of people lining the side. So when we flipped over, our guys just got flushed down the river. They didn't even know anything happened. They didn't know I was missing until I showed back up. I floated down the river. My shins were all bloody. I'd lost a shoe along the way somehow. But that's the only way they knew anything. And at that point, I couldn't even process what just happened. So I didn't even really talk about it. And I actually had to get in the raft and like finish the rest of the trip. But even my wife picked me up after we got back to the church, and I didn't even tell her at first because I'm like, I don't really know what just happened. Like God took me through that for a reason, and I needed to process that.
Well, how do you begin that conversation? Hey, honey, by the way, I died.
Right.
I pretty much died almost, and you almost lost me.
Yep.
And I'm feeling like big changes need to happen.
Right. Yeah.
Because I have this wake up call now.
Yep. No, I needed the space to really process and say what did happen, because it was a wake up call in that moment, but it was a wake up call for my life.
Yeah.
And I really needed to see, okay, God, you're calling me to something bigger, but what does that look like?
Yeah. That story is so powerful that you even had a soundtrack going. Did you hear the piano in the background going?
I like that.
Yes. We're recording this in Create Hope Studios, and we always have music lessons and different things that go on. Yes. People listening, you might not have even heard the piano, but we hear it here in the studio. And I was like, man, he's preaching. He's got his own soundtrack going on here. Yeah, you know, it's interesting how we live our lives, and you know, we go through the motions of the everyday. Wake up, do our thing, hang out at home, go to sleep, do it all over again. And before we know it, I don't want to say our most productive years, but definitely we fall into a comfort level.
Right. Yeah.
And we don't even realize it. And it takes a moment like that to make you go, wait a minute, am I truly doing the things that I'm gifted and called to do?
Right. Yeah. And that's been my message now, because had I not had that wake up, I probably would have continued to settle and just went through the motions. So I needed that wake-up call. But I want to tell others, you don't need the wake-up call. You don't need the rock bottom moment. A lot of times somebody passes away and we start to contemplate life, or we hit rock bottom ourselves and we start to change. But you don't have to wait for that. Your wake-up call is today. Like I said, you woke up today for a reason. Start to contemplate now. Like, what can I do today? And because that's one of the lessons I got from mine was, if it all would have ended in that moment, is this the legacy I want to leave? And the answer was no, because I don't want to get to the end of my life and realize I could have done more. I could have helped more people. I could have made a bigger impact. So I started looking at, from that moment forward, how can I live my life to the fullest in all that God has called me to do? Yeah.
So let me ask you a question based on what you just said.
All right.
Why do we do that? Why do we do the bare minimum to bring about change in our lives, whether it's spiritually, mentally, or physically? Why do we do just enough to get by and never want to pursue the full potential of what we could be? What do you think it is?
Yeah, part of it is, our nervous systems are designed to keep us safe. So anytime we start to step out of our comfort zone, it signals danger. Like, no, you shouldn't do that. The fear signs start to go off of, no, you shouldn't put yourself out there. You shouldn't go for that dream. So we just kind of accept that and say, you know what? I should stay here in this comfort zone. But it's on the other side of that comfort zone where the change really happens. And I talk about this in my TED Talk. I did a TED Talk about this. We're stepping out of that comfort zone. Step one, you hit the danger zone, and that's where you fear. Those signs, the fear sets in right there and says, oh no, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not worthy enough to take this step. But then you got to push through that. You got to push through the fear. And one of my quotes I used in my TED Talk was from Mark Twain. And he said, I've lived a life of many troubles. Most of them never happened. So we make all these stories in our heads.
Yeah.
And I truly believe most people don't get what they want in life because the story they keep telling themselves of why they can't have it. So you've got to speak louder than those voices in your head. And that's why I love using scripture, because the Bible is the most important personal development book there is. Like there's from affirmations to motivation, inspiration, everything you need is right there. So when you start to look to that and just really, I love using like the joy of the Lord is my strength, like that, because I'm not always happy. I'm not always in a good mood, but the joy of the Lord is all over me.
Yeah.
So people get to see that. A lot of people say, why are you happy all the time? Well, I'm not. I have my days, I have my moments, but I have the joy of the Lord. And it's like when you focus on things like that, it allows you to say, you know what, this isn't just about me.
Yeah.
He's got a bigger plan for me. And I think that's part of the things that hold us back is we try to do it ourselves. We say, okay, God's called me to take that step, but we justify why we can't do it.
Right.
And Moses is the best example of this. When God called him to lead the people, and he was like, I can't do that. I have a stutter. I can't even speak, and made all the excuses in the book. But like God was like, no, I've called you. And he didn't allow him to step back. He was like, no, I've called you to this.
Right.
So we shouldn't allow ourselves to step back either. If God calls us to it, he's going to help you do it.
Right. There are so many examples in Scripture that talk about our minds, our mindset, how the ways we're supposed to think, the way we're supposed to act. And I love you talking about having the joy of the Lord. I grew up in a church where we used to sing a song, "The joy of the Lord is my strength." And it was, I don't know if we sang it every week, but we sang it a lot. And it stuck with me, and still to this day, it kind of resonates, and it comes out every once in a while, and I'll start to sing it. There's a bunch of scriptures that I wrote down here, because it's interesting when you jump on YouTube, and man, you talk about putting yourself out there. YouTube has everything positive and everything negative.
For sure. Yeah.
So anything positive that you find talking about mindset, you'll find another video talking about how negative it is and whatever. And it's exhausting, right? Yeah. But the truth is, when you go to Scripture, there are plenty of scriptures that talk about that we should have the mind of Christ, that we should think on his ways and see ourselves the way he sees us, and to put our minds there. And I have several scriptures here. So I told you one that I wanted to really dive into in Philippians 4:8. Paul is writing this, and he's Philippians is known as the joy book. If you didn't know that. And so it's a book that's all about focusing on joy. Right. And as he's winding down his thoughts, he's saying, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think on these things. And that just, to me right there, there's a list. We can bullet point that sucker right there and start going on all these things. And Paul's like, there's all these other things that are going to come along and try to distract you and pull you down. But to be who you need to be in Christ, think on these things.
Right, yeah.
And
it's all about where you put your attention, where your focus goes, your energy flows. So a great example for a business owner, they could get 100 5-star reviews for their business, but one person gives them a 1-star review. They're going to focus on that 1 star. And they're going to forget about all the good that's going on. And they're like, man, and they just get so negative about this one bad review. Well, what if you focused on all the good in your life? So you could go either way. It's your mind is going to take you down the rabbit hole. Like you said, YouTube videos, you could see all the positive or you could see the negative. I choose to see the positive. I don't ignore the negative, which I like Tony Robbins' view on that. He's like, positive thinking is kind of like going out and your garden is full of weeds and just saying, oh, there's no weeds. There's no weeds. It's like, that's not what you need to do. You need to acknowledge the weeds and say, I need to go in there and pull out the weeds and plant new flowers. And I think that's what we need to do with our thoughts. Acknowledge what's coming up and say, is this of God? And if not, I'm not going to, this doesn't serve me. I'm going to focus my attention over here on the good.
Man, okay, so I don't know. We don't have a couch in here. You could be my psychiatrist and I could lay down right now. We can talk, because this is one of the most difficult parts of being in ministry as a pastor of a church, where we have a tendency to magnify the negative that comes in, even though it's just not near as many as the positive.
Right. Yeah.
There's so many positive and good things going on, and then that one negative comes in, and we can literally let that derail the entire thing.
For sure. And I don't know the statistics now because this was years ago, but there was a very high rate of pastors being on anti-anxiety medications and depression medications because of, I mean, you guys, there's a burden that you take on because the people are burdened and you're dealing with people. And a lot of times it's like we take on their issues and it's hard if we can't process them ourselves. So I know as pastors, it is a stressful profession as it is. So it's like, that's why we have to protect where our thoughts and where our focus is at all times. Because if we don't, that's part of that, just going through the motions. If we don't focus on what's happening, all of a sudden our mind goes down the rabbit trail of the negative versus being intentional on the positive.
Yeah. Well, it's tough. I mean, because when that one email comes in or someone makes that one comment, you know, I'll just be transparent and tell you, I mean, look at the name of this podcast. I mean, it's my name. Right. And so, you know, we've had comments, what is this all about you? And so, listen, the reason why it's not the church's name is because if we were trying to promote the podcast and we said, hey, listen to New Hope Community Church podcast, somebody who doesn't go to New Hope would say, I already have a church. I'm not listening to it.
For sure.
That's the only reason it's my name.
Right, yeah.
And so we put it as my name. I'm the pastor of the church, and this is where I'm going to be for a long time.
Yeah.
And that way, the church has a podcast that goes out. We have conversations with awesome people that we're trying to help, and we talk about Scripture. Yeah. And it opens it up to a whole new thing where the overwhelming majority of people who listen to the podcast or who watch it, they say, oh, man, it's great. But that one comment, well, it's all about your ego.
Right.
You go, oh, no, it's not.
Yeah.
And you let that, you absorb that negative comment. That's not even true.
Yeah. And that's what I like to say. Nothing has meaning until we give it meaning. So that's where we have to protect our own thoughts and think, you know, deep down why this podcast exists.
Yes.
And I totally agree. If you make it about the church, then you're going to alienate a bunch of people that you can reach versus using your name. This is what I talk about, and I'm part of this church. You might reach people in the community that all of a sudden want to come to your church just because of that.
Yeah.
So keeping that top of mind. Now, I've seen this work the other way. People get that comment and they think, but maybe they're right. Maybe I shouldn't put myself out there.
Yeah.
And they don't move forward. And because of that, they don't make the impact that God's called them to make. So that's where it could go either way. As long as we protect, starting with, God, is this what you've called me to do?
Yes.
And then if it is, he's going to back it up of why you should do it this way, why it should be your name. And you keep reminding yourself because the voices will come in. I think the worst voices are in our own head. But then we do get them from the other people, those comments, those things that try to bring you down. And it's planting seeds into our mind. And those seeds can be planted, those could be weeds that they're planted in our mind. And those weeds can start to grow and overtake us. So it's like, no, we got to get rid of those and say, nope, those are just weeds. I'm going to plant the seeds that are going to produce a harvest.
Yeah. And it's, you know, I have a story to tell you how negative that can be. So I became the senior pastor of New Hope in 2013, 14. I can't remember.
Yeah.
And I remember when I became the senior pastor of the church, I thought to myself, I can't sing anymore. I had been leading worship as a youth pastor. I really enjoy writing music, singing, leading worship, all of those things. And I remember when I became a senior pastor, I thought to myself, oh, I can't do that anymore. Because if I do, then it'll be drawing attention to myself. So I have to die to that.
Right.
Even though it's probably my favorite thing in the world to do.
Yep. And it's probably a gift from God that you were able to do that.
It is. You know how each of us have certain things that we do that come naturally?
Yeah.
That someone might go, oh, I really would stress about that. Yep. And then you go, well, no, for me, it's not. Well, it's singing and doing those things, it doesn't stress me. I mean, it is something, it's just a part of who I am.
Yeah.
So when I had that thought, well, that I can no longer do that. I went 3 or 4 years without doing it.
Wow.
Because it was my mindset.
Yeah.
That's what it was. And then it took one guy. One guy came up to me and he said, why don't you ever sing? And I said, and I told him what I just told you.
Yeah.
And he said, man, that's of the devil.
Wow.
Like, where does that even come from? I said, well, somebody might say that I'm making it all about. He said, man, that's of the devil. And seriously, and I think it's there are many motivational speakers and different people who talk to you about sometimes you need to be jarred. For you, it was the story of what happened to you in the river.
Right.
Yeah, you have to be like shaken, wake up. That's sick thinking.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember, I think they're right.
So with those 3 years, let me ask you, did you feel like a piece of you was missing, not being able to express that?
Oh my gosh. Dead.
Yeah.
I mean, not able to properly deal with emotion, not able to properly deal with, and like having no idea of why.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like if you have a headache and I got the ibuprofen, but I go, you can't have this, Justin.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Live with your headache. You're like, but it's right there.
Yep.
Give me some, like, that's what it was for me.
Right.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm getting off.
No, that's good, because that's what I want people listening to understand as well, of like, don't allow other people's story to speak life into you, because it will shut down your own dreams, your own calling that God has for you.
Speak death into you.
Yeah, it will speak death into you. Yeah. So, and that goes back to the conversation of why do we settle? Sometimes it's somebody spoke life into you or spoke death into you. And for some people, it started earlier. Their parents, they remember the story of you shouldn't speak up. So they've lived with this story of I can't speak. I can't speak in public. My voice isn't worthy of being heard, is all coming from a story that my parents kept trying to shut me down. Maybe I was talking too much or whatever it was. But that one little seed haunts people for the rest of their life, and they become shy and introverted and feel like there's no worth in who they are in their own story. So we got to be careful on who we allow to speak into our lives.
Yeah. Well, in that story I just told you, there may have been some folks who said that to me. I don't know for sure, but I know for sure it was self-talk.
For sure.
I was saying it to myself.
Yep.
Like, I don't know that I could really pinpoint somebody saying it other than I was the first one who said it.
And that goes back to, like I said earlier, the worst voices we hear are in our own head. So yeah, and that's where I think affirmations, I like to tell people you have to speak louder than the voices in your head. And now I think most people do affirmations wrong, because people are like, Google, like, what affirmation should I say? Oh, I'm happy, I'm healthy, I feel great. And they just say stuff, versus an affirmation should be a feeling. And that's why an affirmation of me is, for me, is the joy of the Lord is my strength. Like, that excites me. It gives me an energy. And I think that's what affirmations are designed to do. They're designed to shift your energy, because everything is energy. And energy, it should evoke emotion, because emotion is energy in motion. So for me, walking around, spending time with the Lord, put on worship music, and just reciting some affirmations, like, it gives me this energy that's so positive that helps me speak louder than those negative voices in my head.
So let me give you a resolution to that story about the music, okay?
Yeah.
So we went to this conference called Seeds Conference. It was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and a church called Church on the Move. And their worship leader at the time is a guy named Andy Chrisman. He was in the Christian band called For Him back in the 90s.
Wow.
He's going to be on this podcast here in a month or two.
Nice.
And he led worship, and there's a well-known worship song called No Longer Slaves. This was the first time I'd ever heard it. And Andy's voice is just incredible. He's probably one of my top 5 singers. And I'll tell him that when he's on here. But he led that song, and him and I have a similar, we're tenors, and have a similar tone, and he sang it, and I literally sat there and I went, like, that's the first song I'm doing. I'm coming out of retirement
With that
song.
Yeah.
And because it spoke so much to me. And so the words of that song are, I'm no longer a slave to fear.
Yeah.
Because I am a child of God.
Yep.
Is a mindset song.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That all the self-talk, all the things I've been talking about, and I'm letting people now know this on the podcast for the first time.
Yeah.
First time. So when I sang that song, it was on an Easter Sunday, I believe. It became a song that I was then singing at many people's funerals over the course of the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Because for me, that song was a song of worship that set me free from something that was, I had like put chains on myself.
Right. Yeah.
And so I wasn't just singing it because, I like the song. I mean, it was a freeing song.
Yeah.
You know, and so anyway, that's kind of the story behind that. I was like, oh my goodness, you know, and now I don't really have to get up and do much singing anymore. Now I don't feel any of those restrictions, but we have great people on the teams who do it. So anyway.
Well, speaking of singing, because you brought up, it's the thing I think ties into the theme of this too, because back when I was 18, I actually had a dream that I grew up around country music. My dad's a video producer here in Nashville, so I would go on shoots with him, meet some country music singers. But I had a dream, and I was on stage, and I was looking out. The lights were on me. I was looking out, and people were crying. And that's one thing I love about music, just the emotion and the connection you get through it. But the dream felt so real. I woke up, and I was like, that's the dream. Like, God is telling me I need to be a country music singer. Like, it was that real for me. And so I started taking guitar lessons, singing lessons, doing all the things. But then I realized I can't sing. So I was like, why would God give me this vision and for something that I physically can't do? So that was when I was 18. And over the years, I just forgot about that. Well, fast forward almost 20 years later, I was leading this after my near-death accident. I created a retreat. And I was leading a group. There was about 12 people there. And during it, I looked out and one guy stood up and he just starts crying. And God brought me right back to that vision. And he said, I didn't call you to be a country music singer. I showed you, and thinking back on the dream, I didn't even have an instrument. And I wasn't actually singing in the dream. I was just on the stage. And he said, I was showing you, I'm giving you a platform where you're going to connect with people. And he brought me right back to that vision. And he said, this was the dream. So for me, it was to tell people, don't give up on your dream. Like, it might not look the same as what you thought it was supposed to be, but if God's got a dream for you, he's going to see it to fruition.
Oh, man.
And it took me almost 20 years later to see the dream come true. But you see that in, like, I think about Joseph in the Bible.
Oh, I was just going to say
he had
man.
a vision that he was
Yes.
going to lead. And then it was probably around 20 years later. He gets thrown into the pit. He gets into Potiphar's house, into prison, into the palace, all those years before the dream actually became a reality for him.
Yeah.
So, but we live in that quick fix society. So can we stay true long enough to see the dream fulfilled? That's the question.
It's powerful. I mean, when you had that dream that God was going to bring you to a point where you're going to be sharing something and it was going to bring someone to tears because you're helping them to a place of breakthrough, to be all who God created them to be.
Yeah.
But before you get there, Justin, you're going to fall out of a boat and you're going to almost die.
Right.
And you're going to go through this and this and this.
Yeah.
And, you know, we didn't talk about this. Tell me a little bit about when you come home, you have a practice that's doing fairly well, right?
Yeah.
With your wife.
Yep.
Are you still doing that? Or did you come home and say, hey, I'm called to do something else?
Yeah. And it took a little time because I did step back and I really looked at, okay, if God's called me to go bigger, what does that look like? And I looked at my own life and said, okay, what am I passionate about? And I loved mindset, personal development, leadership. I had read over 100 books a year for over 10 years. Like, I love studying, gaining knowledge. So I was like, I just want to take all the stuff I've learned that's helped us become successful and just give that to other people. So I just started putting myself out there online. And it was really March of 2020, January of 2020, the first of 2020, I started a Facebook group. And I was like, I don't know if anybody's going to listen. I'm just going to start putting myself out there. I don't know if you ever felt that starting your podcast. I don't know if anybody's going to listen, but we'll just put it out there. So I did that, and it grew to 1,000 people in the first month. So I was like, okay, people are listening, and it started gaining traction. So then I kept praying through it, and I talked to my wife about it, and she was like, you need to go for this. And so she took over the clinic. She's got other doctors and stuff there with her, and she's kind of running that, which allows me to travel and speak and do things like this just to make a bigger impact.
Yeah.
But yeah, it came from processing of what have I been through. And now one of my mentors is Rory Vaden. I don't know if Nick's ever mentioned him. He's the founder of Brand Builders, which is how I met Nick. And he's got a saying that you are powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were. Mm-hmm. So thinking about the stuff that you've gone through, the lessons you've learned along the way, somebody's going through that right now, and you can speak life into them. So that's what I look at, is all the stuff that I've been through. How can I take those lessons and speak those to somebody that could help them in the season they're in right now?
Mm-hmm. At what point did the TED Talk come along?
Yeah, so I did my TED Talk in 2022. And I'm about to do my second one here in April. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah, and that was another God thing. And because that was, in this TED Talk that I'm about to do is on overcoming the fear of public speaking. Because I had a tremendous fear of public speaking. So it's something I had to overcome because I knew God had called me to make a bigger impact and to speak. And I was terrified of it, to the point of, even in college, I had a panic attack during a speech in a speech class. Mm-hmm. And it created a story: you should never speak. This is not for you. You can't do this. But I knew God had called me to overcome that fear and to actually reach people. So I had to actually overcome that myself. So, but fast forward, I started putting myself out there, building content, and then God gave me the vision of the TEDx, speaking there. Because that was one thing back when I saw Simon Sinek's TED Talk, Start With Why, years ago. And just how simple that concept was and how impactful it was. I was like, man, one day I'd want to be able to do that. Well, that one day I was like, okay, I want to make that a reality. Mm-hmm. So what would it take? And God just started aligning. I reached out to a friend who had done a TED Talk before and asked, okay, what's the process? He's like, you need to shoot an application video. Firstly, you got to have an idea where it's spreading. That's what TED's about. And then you shoot an application video and you start applying everywhere. There's different ones around the country. He said, if you do get accepted, it'll take you a year to 18 months going through the whole process, and you'll get rejected a bunch and go through the process. And even my friend and mentor now, Rory Vaden, is a New York Times best-selling author. And I think he was rejected 11 times before he was able to do his TED Talk. Mm. So there were thoughts in my own head, like, who am I to do this? But I knew God had called me to do that. So I talked to that friend. I shot my application video on a Friday. That next Monday, I was going to start applying. Well, that Friday, I go out to dinner with a friend here in Nashville. He has no idea I even want to do TED. About an hour into our conversation, he said, yeah, I met a cool guy earlier this week that came into town. He's from Delaware, and he's the organizer for TEDx. And wow. I said, I just shot my application video. I'm about to start applying. And he was like, well, I'll connect you. You guys can talk. If he likes your idea, you guys can take it from there. So I got on a call with that guy the next week, and he accepted me right there on the spot. Mm-hmm. So God took it from a year to 18-month timeline to within a week, I was accepted to be on the TEDx stage. So yeah. That's the power of God can just organize the steps. I'm telling you,
that is a God's timing thing if I've ever heard one,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So it's very cool. So speaking of that, then, I gave you a scripture from Philippians chapter 4. What's the scripture that you love when it comes to mindset that you go to?
Yeah, a big go-to is just being transformed by the renewing of your mind. And I think that aligns also with holding every thought captive. Because what if we truly held each thought captive? And the thought that does come in when somebody gives you that bad email or whatever, and we actually look at what are those thoughts that I'm thinking? Mm-hmm. Think, are those thoughts actually from God? Do these thoughts serve me or not?
Yeah.
If we truly held those thoughts captive, we'd realize most of them aren't. Most of them are our own heads getting in our way versus focusing on what's truly from God. Mm-hmm. And when we can shift our focus back to that, we can weed out all the weeds that are in there and start focusing on fertilizing the soil, growing those seeds of positivity.
Yeah. So what you're talking, Romans 12:2 is be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Yep. And then 2 Corinthians 10:5 is we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and we take every thought captive to obey Christ. Mm-hmm. And I don't think people understand that God has given them the ability to control their thoughts.
Right.
To not just let their minds run amok.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet we so often do that.
Yeah. And I think an analogy one of my friends uses is like a lemon. If we had a lemon and we squeezed the lemon juice should come out. Well, us as Christians, when we're squeezed, when the stuff of life happens, Christ should come out of us. But a lot of times that's not the first thing that comes out because of what's in our mind. Somebody cuts us off on traffic. We want to get frustrated and get upset with that person versus, you know what, they might not have even seen that I was here. They just changed lanes on accident. If we can start letting go of the frustration and the pressure we want to put on ourselves and on other people and just go to the ultimate of what is it to live like Christ? It's love. And if we could focus on love versus any frustration, jealousy, anger, any of those things, when those things start to come up, that is flesh. It's going to come up. Can I get back to love and focus on all things love? Then life would be completely different if we could. The quicker we can get over to love and let go of the other things, life is going to change.
Yeah. My mind even goes to, in the culture that we live in today, just anxiety and stress. And in the scriptures that even talk about your anxious thoughts that run away and that you just let them kind of take control of your life instead of, going back to taking every thought captive.
Right.
Not allowing that to really control who you are as a person. And that's really what sets up those walls of fear, those walls of anxiety, all of those different things is when you let those thoughts run unchecked.
Absolutely. And I think it goes back to spending time in the Word. Because I do believe the more you spend in the Word of God, the more the Word of God will get into you. And I look at how many times the Word says trust. Trust in the Lord. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. If you're truly holding your thoughts captive, you aren't trusting at all if you're just letting those anxious thoughts run. Because if you truly trusted, you could let go and be like, I know God's got this. Versus I need to worry about it myself and I need to be anxious over it. No, if you can truly trust, and that's hard. It's hard to get to that place. But when I can get to that place of I'm truly surrendering and trusting in Him and He's got me and I'm going to delight in the Lord and He's going to give me the desires of my heart. And I can trust in that. And when I can truly get there, I have peace. I don't have to be anxious.
Awesome. So let's look at Romans 12:2. And I'm going to ask you, so when it says be transformed by the renewing of your mind, let me ask you specifically, what do you think transformation means? Like, how do you teach that when you have your summits and retreats and different things?
Yeah, and it can go different ways. So, and I even think, the gospel, it's not praying a prayer to go to heaven. It's my get out of hell free card. It is to have a transformed life and to say, I'm going to leave my old ways and be like Jesus. There's a transformation that happens.
That's good.
So I say the same thing with your thoughts. If you focus on the negativity, you're going to live a certain way. You're going to be anxious. You're going to be fearful. You're going to get angry easier. Versus if I live a transformed life and come over here to the positive, then when the things come up, I'm more forgiving. I forgive myself. I don't let the anxious thoughts creep in. So I think that's part of the transformation to say, I no longer am this over here. I am a new person. So just like when we're baptized, we come into the faith, it's like we're buried here and raised to a new life. So I think that transformation in our mind is creating a whole new person.
And transformation is is it a process? What do you think?
I think it can be, but also change can happen in an instant.
An instant?
Yeah. So I think the process is staying there. So I think, and I got that from Tony Robbins, like change can happen over time, but it really happens in the instant. The moment you decide to change, that's where the change happens. But then it's like, okay, can I hold my thoughts captive? Do they keep pulling me over to the anxiousness, the worry, the all those things, the depression, whatever it is? So that's the process of can I stay over here?
You and I were talking before we turned the cameras on about our journey with physical health and the things that we've been doing to work on that. And that's what my mind just went to when it came to transformation. And so I'll tell a little bit of my story and then you share yours too, because it's cool. But back in the beginning of December, I was having some health problems and was going to some doctors just to see, hey, what's going on? Did some tests on the heart and different things. And they're like, hey, everything's good. You're going to be around for a long time and whatever. I was like, then why do I feel not good? I feel bad. And the doctors were real nice and were saying, well, you're kind of carrying some extra weight. You're kind it's funny. I wanted him to say, tell me I'm going to die.
Right.
Like, tell me if you don't change something right now, you need to do, like, give me to a point you talked about earlier, that point, give me to that pain point where I realize
painful enough. I have to change.
I have to change.
Yeah.
They didn't say that, but I went out of there and we went, I remember my kids had a band concert and we went out to eat beforehand just to kind of celebrate, to get ready for the show. And I mean, I ate something. I didn't even eat that much. And I was sitting there, I was like miserable. And I was like, I'm done. Like, I'm done with feeling awful. So went to the concert, sat through that feeling not good. And I got out a notebook and just started writing out this plan. And the plan for me was like a physical health plan. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to kind of journal this, and here's the exercise program I'm going to do. Here's the foods I'm cutting out. Here's the different thing, and here's my monthly goals of things I want to achieve. And it was all based off of something I've talked on this, where I had already been 2 years into a process of mapping out my own spiritual journey, the time that I wanted to spend in the Bible every day. That is in the Old Testament, in the Psalms and Proverbs, and then in the New Testament. My personal reading plan that I made for myself, my time with God, that has, it's total. I keep it completely separate from what I do for the church, and my preaching. This is my time with God, and a prayer life that goes along with it. And then on top of that, a reading thing that I would do for like personal growth, that would be my nightly reading. And here I'm doing all that stuff, but I wasn't doing it for physical health. And I remember having this moment of when I was writing out this physical health plan. I was like, wait a minute. I think my body has been telling me, my mind has been saying, hey, we've been growing it on this path and getting closer to God, spending time in the Word, spending time growing in our personal development, and the physical side has been completely neglected. So I set up that. Now I'm a little over 2 months in and halfway to my goal. But I was telling you before, I don't even care about the goal anymore. Because now I'm like, this is just it. This is who I'm going to be. Exercising, eating the best that I can, and enjoying it.
And that's where it's hard to describe when did the transformation happen. But along the way, it does happen. So you transform. You're a different person. You're a person who exercising is just part of your routine. That's what you do. So the day one that you did it, that probably wasn't you. It was like the old me is showing up and he's going to put in the steps. But along the way, we do become the person that is a healthier person. That's going to make the right choices. It's going to say no to the dessert because I have a goal here. But you mentioned some people need that shaking moment. And it's such a mindset thing. Because even the people, people that had the Widowmaker heart attack and survived, they did a study and they said over 90% of those people that survived, their doctor told them, you have to change your life, change everything you're doing or you're not going to make it. Over 90% of those people still didn't change. It wasn't enough to scare them into making a change. So why is that? Because it's so much easier just to eat the bad food and not exercise and do those things. We have to, in our own mind, make it bigger. And I think that's why the big why principle helps in so many areas. Like, what is the why behind this? What is the why for you being healthy? Obviously, your why was big enough to spend time with the Lord, separate from what you prepare to preach, or just personally spend time over there, spend time with your family. But you needed a why big enough on the health side. And I look at it as, we see it with pastors all the time. They do spend all the time with the Lord, let their health go, and they die way too early. They don't impact the amount of people they could have impacted had they took their health seriously. And we see this on the other areas. People focus on their fitness and growing their business and leading their families, but they neglect the spiritual side. And what good is it to gain the whole world and lose your own soul? So it's like you have to have that balance. And I think in all areas, it's down to like, what is the why? And really not coming up with your own personal why, but like, God, why have you, and that's why I look at my own story. Why am I still here?
Yeah.
God's got me around for a reason. God woke me up today. For you listening, God woke you up today. Why are you still here? And then wake up and live out that purpose every single day.
And there's power to me in really sitting down and mapping that out.
Yeah. That's the hardest part. And that's what I tell people is give yourself strategic thinking time.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we just get in the go busyness of life and we don't sit there and process things. And I like to think, I mean, God's speaking to us all the time. Will we be quiet enough to listen? And that quiet time comes through thinking, journaling, spending time with him, and not just praying to him, but trying to listen for him.
Yeah. Yeah, the journal part of it for me, I wrote down, I had the first couple of weeks where I really wanted to focus on how I was feeling. So if I said I wasn't feeling good or whatever, I would document that. Yep. Because I wanted to have a record, because I knew that I'm gonna stay with this. I'm gonna stick with it. I'm gonna get there. And there's going to come a time when maybe I don't want to do it on a certain day, or I don't want to, I'm tired or whatever. I want to have a record where I can go back and read and motivate myself to say, oh, we've come a long way. Let's not go back. Yeah. And it's helped me.
So I want you to speak to that, because a lot of people make the excuse, I don't have time to journal. But what was the importance of you making the time? Because we make the time for what's important to us. So we're all busy. We can use that excuse. But what was it for you that said, no, I'm going to make this an important time for me to actual journal?
I just know myself at this point. I know the certain things that I need to get me there. And I think I had an experience several years ago where I was in a hard place. I had gone through a difficult season at the church. Lost some friendships, and it hurt really bad. And I started journaling out just how I was feeling, and kept several pages of that. And I remember when I was journaling it, I was thinking, this is kind of silly. I don't know. I mean, what good is this ever going to be? Yeah. And I got a few years down the road, and I got to a place of health and good friendships and great people who surrounded my family and I, and hey, we all go through seasons, right?
For sure.
And I was in a better season, and I found that journal, and I went back and read it, and I went, oh my goodness, I was in a messed up place.
Right. Yep.
And it reminded me where God had brought me.
Yes.
And what God had brought me out of. And so in this time when I was starting this, I had that in mind of going, I want to record the progress. To see that, like, this is a new way of life, and I don't want to forget how bad I felt. Yep. Physically.
Right.
I want to have that kind of a pin.
Right.
Put in that.
Remind yourself, I'm not going back there.
I'm not going back to that.
Yeah.
I'm done with that. In fact, my joke was I had a good 46-year run with that way of living.
Right.
So now I'm going to do the back half of life over here. Although you did mention no desserts. I'm going to write that down. That's a good thought.
But then again, that's where the balance comes in, because I do think, and even for me today, I've had my own health journey where just the other day I officially lost 30 pounds.
Awesome.
But I can still have the dessert here and there. I don't deprive myself of things. I just have transformed into the person who makes better decisions.
Yeah.
I do, majority of the days, eat clean. Majority of the days I am exercising, doing the things I need to do, but I'm not depriving myself either. So I think that does become, though, I've transformed in the person that makes better decisions.
Yeah, my whole deal, because, okay, let's just be transparent here. All right, I guess I'll do this and put myself out in the public. Yeah, so I had weighed myself in the beginning of December, and it's Christmas season, and my excuse is always, well, it's Christmas parties.
Oh, yeah.
There's cookies and chocolates everywhere, so I'll start New Year's. And then I think Nick's podcast, Nick had some guy on there. I don't know if it was you. If it was you, you can say it was you. Yeah. Well, the guy said, "Hey, if you're waiting for New Year's resolution, you already lost."
And I was like, we did talk about that when I was with Nick. Yeah.
Okay. So I was like, well, that ain't good. I guess I need to start right now and make sure that this happens. Yeah. And so that's when I sat down with that whole thing and wrote out this plan for myself. Because what I would do before is things like keto or these crazy fad things that there's no way you can possibly keep up with.
Right.
All right.
Yep.
And some people may be able to keep up with them, but Josh Huisman can't keep up with it. And I weighed myself and I was 262. And I was like, oh my goodness. I'm like up there for my size. I'm like, this isn't good. So this starts to explain some of the stuff I got going on.
Right.
And so I was like, I'm going to set a goal that for the course of the next year, 1 year from now, I'm going to be a completely different person. I'm going to be in the best shape of my life I've ever been in, as opposed to right now being in the worst shape of my life that I've ever been in. And I may weigh myself, I may not, but it's going to start with every day, because I have my daily habits of my reading that I do. And there was a time, believe it or not, people, when I didn't have this habit.
Right.
And in fact, I probably several years ago would have never thought, really? You seriously read that much scripture every day? And it's because over time, I got myself to a point where I fell in love with it.
Right.
And now when I go to bed every night, like I really look forward to, I used to be the guy who'd be like, well, I can't do my reading in the morning because there's so much stuff going on and got the kids and what. Now I look forward to getting my cup of black coffee, no cream, sitting down with the Bible and just reading it and enjoying that time.
Yeah.
And I wait a minute. I can take that same mindset and apply it to every area of my life. To where I'm going to get a couple months down the road and look forward to going on a 4-mile run that I did today before you and I sat down. Yeah. And because I have a deacon meeting tonight.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like when can I get in those things when I'm ready? So that for me, so now I'm halfway to my goal. I'm so far ahead of where I thought I would be, but I don't even care about that anymore because I don't even care about the goal. Now it's like, this is just who I am.
Yeah, and it's a way of life. And you did the right thing. You looked at, I want to be a completely different person in a year. Because that's what I like to get people to look at, is not just what's the goal, what's the number, whether it's a weight loss number or a financial number. First, ask yourself, who do I need to become in order to get that? Yeah. I need to become somebody who exercises regularly, who makes better choices in what they eat. So looking at that, and then the best thing to do is not to track the number, because the scale weight will mess with your head, trying to figure out, some people weigh themselves every day and it's up or down, even water fluctuations. The best thing to do is
horrible.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Look at, and that's where tracking and journaling, things like this, is even how you feel and how you're sleeping, different things. But the best way to track is, am I doing the things day in and day out that are going to get me to become that person in a year? And not worry about what the scale's doing now, but am I doing the things right? And it could get to the end of the day, like today, you know, I did blow it. I ate a cheesecake. I did this and that. That's okay. I'm going to get back on track tomorrow. And I'm going to do this, this, and this. And each day, if I show up and do this, this, and this, I'm going to become a different person.
Yeah. Is that what you did? How did you lose the 30?
Yeah. So, and I reached out. So, and years ago, I competed in a bodybuilding competition. So it's like, I knew what to do. I just needed somebody to hold me accountable. And so I reached out to a friend. So Nick Alfano was on Nick's podcast. So another friend of ours is Cole Taylor, and he runs a group called The Starting Line. And they coach entrepreneurs and their fitness, especially busy people. Like, let me make it simple for you. So for me, I'd done keto, I'd done all these different things, and there's so many different things out there, and there's positive and negatives on all of them. Right. So I was like, I don't want to deal with all the guesswork or spend hours researching what's the best. I'm like, just tell me what to do. So they laid out a plan for me, and they assigned me a coach that I have to be accountable to. So I'm going to show up and actually say, did I hit my numbers? Did I get my exercise in? Did I hit a certain calorie goal, a macronutrient goal? So because I had that in place, it held me accountable to not eat a little bit more than I should, or to not skip out on the workout. So I think you don't have to have that. Just get an accountability partner along the way. Because if we could all hold ourselves accountable, we would all hit all of our goals. So I think a biggest part is have yourself an accountability partner. But I don't know, you didn't need that, right? You were able to do it on your own.
Yeah, I don't have one. Not that I wouldn't wouldn't want one for sure.
Yeah.
But for me, it's because of that pain point that you talked about.
The pain is strong enough, it will motivate you.
It will.
Yeah.
I really had gotten to a point. I'm not joking. I thought this is bad.
Yeah.
Like, and I really have to get a handle on this.
Yeah.
You know? And so that has motivated me. And I love what you're saying about you are going to have times. Like the way I look to it is I'll still do a dessert on the weekends.
Yep.
I don't, if people are going, well, what's your secret? Like, what do you do? Is there anything special? Well, yeah, I don't think there's any shortcuts.
Yeah.
I kick my butt.
Right.
Is what I do.
Yeah.
I don't eat breakfast. I do the intermittent fasting thing.
Right.
I try not to eat anything after 7 p.m. I cut out fries and chips and things like that. Yeah. I don't eat only chicken broth.
Right.
I get a sandwich that I want.
Yeah.
You know, that's not a big bacon cheeseburger, but it's like something from Firehouse or Jason's Deli or sandwich and a little cup of soup, maybe, but usually just a sandwich.
Yep.
Drink water.
Yeah.
I don't know. I love the ice drinks. I'm addicted to the ice drinks. But.
Well, the good thing that is, and that's an easy change for people to make, the intermittent fasting, and it limits your window of eating. So it limits the amount of calories you're taking in. Because you could eat the exact same thing in those hours, but plus a breakfast meal puts you into the surplus, which makes it hard to lose weight. Yeah. So that's a great thing to do. Kind of bookend your days, limit the window that you are eating, limits the amount of food you're taking in.
Can I tell you a mindset thing that I did with this? So when I was little, my grandma Huisman, when we would stay at her house, we would go to her and say, Grandma, we want a snack, or Grandma, we want, and she would say, tell your tummy to be quiet in the name of Jesus.
Really?
She would say that.
Yeah.
And we would laugh and whatever, right?
Yeah.
But think about this. Take every thought captive. Yeah. And so to me, intermittent fasting has all of those qualities that you just talked about, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But here's the one that I look at it from a mindset perspective. I'm telling myself, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Denying the flesh.
Right. Yep. Here's what we're having for breakfast. Okay. It's black coffee.
Yep.
That's it.
That's right.
And so now I'll have pastor breakfasts, or sometimes when people will invite me out. Yeah. And I don't go out and go, well, guys, sorry, I'm not going to do that because I'm on the keto or what.
Yeah.
If there's a rare opportunity where I'm out with someone, I live my life.
Right. Yep.
Okay. But then I jump right back on the wagon.
All right.
The next day.
Pick it back up.
You know, and so it doesn't derail me for everything. So anyway.
But there was something that important for people listening. So you made the pain strong enough. The pain motivated you to change. But what a lot of people do, it's painful enough to a certain point, then they forget it. They forget the pain and they get a new comfort zone of like, you know what? I'm good. I lost the weight. I'm feeling better. And they stop doing the things that got them there. And they just go in this cycle. They gain the weight back. They got to make it painful again. So then they'll do something. They'll lose weight, get comfortable again. The weight comes back. So the best thing to do is to keep reminding yourself of, I'm not going back there. I don't want to be that person. I am this new person. And that's where holding those thoughts captive and reminding yourself of why you're doing this, why it's important to stay on and get back on the wagon and keep this thing going, because you don't want to be that person. Otherwise, you get caught in what people normally do, that yo-yo diet.
Yeah. And there are certain temptations that never go away. So my wife and I went to Jason's Deli today and we had lunch together, which is rare that we get to have that time, but we did.
Yeah.
Now, Jason's Deli has something that the devil put in there. I don't know if you know about this.
No, what's this?
The ice cream soft serve machine.
Oh, yeah.
That's like you get the free cone and whatever.
Yeah, hard to resist.
Now, I said I get my treat on the weekend, and believe you me, I don't miss it. I mean, I get my treat, okay?
Yeah.
Well, it's Monday. We're recording this on a Monday. So I see all these dudes walking by with their soft serve ice cream, and I'm like, well, it's really just a small... And I was like, I'm gonna go get it. But then I was like, no, like for real, like are we doing this or not?
Yeah,
you know. Yeah. So because it's anyway, and so it's I had a personal victory today, so I'm celebrating.
And that's huge, yeah, because and it goes both ways. You can have those treats, but it's how many times do you let yourself? Oh, this one will be fine. And then the next day, this one will be fine. And then all of a sudden, 7 days in a row, this one was still fine, and you never got back on track.
Yeah.
So you do the right thing. Even on the weekends, you have your thing, and you get back on track.
Yeah.
Today, you got yourself on track in the moment. You're like, I'm choosing this over that. So congrats on doing that, because that's the hardest part.
It's fun, and I'm not telling you any of this stuff to be bragging, but it's really a thing of going, man. Josh, back in November of 2023. Yeah. Now it's funny. I'm being pretty self-facing here. I mean, I've always been someone who runs and does exercise and things of that nature, but because of what I was experiencing from a health perspective, that started for me after I had COVID in 2020. Yeah. That I had gotten away from it.
Right.
And had 3 years of habits that were not good. And so I really had to make that change. And so I look at it and I go, man, back in November, if November Josh could see what I'm doing now, all right, that's pretty cool. So.
And that's important in documenting the journey and seeing that, pulling those things to mind now of, man, Josh of then is different than Josh of now. That's a transformation that's happened. And I think it's important for people to hear, like, set yourself up for success. Because too many people, they try to go all in on keto, or a big one right now is 75 hard, which people do get good results if they can commit. And it does set up new habits from drinking water and personal development and all these things, but it's not a sustainable thing to do. So a lot of people can go and they'll actually commit and they'll have huge changes on it, and they'll keep some of the habits, but a lot of times they're so exhausted and like, I hit the goal, I hit the number, I got to 75, and they go back to living the old way because that was such a hard way to live. Versus, let me find something sustainable for me. Yeah. That I can make positive changes, and those changes over time is going to lead to this transformation. It's so much easier to stay consistent longer.
Yeah. Well, a motto that I've lived by for myself that it's basically this: there are no shortcuts.
Yeah. You're right.
And I know for myself as a pastor that I wanted to lead people to Christ. I want people to have a stronger, growing, more vibrant relationship with Jesus, so that when people see them, like what you said, when you squeeze them, that Jesus is the one who comes out. Yeah. That's what I wanted for people.
Yeah.
But if I wasn't going to go there myself, how would I ever lead people to that?
Right. Yeah.
And I had a time when I was a guy who was like, hey, maybe just reading the scripture for what I'm going to preach is enough.
Yeah.
And what that led to was basically just surface level preaching.
Wow.
And things that resonated with people, but never really went deep with people. Really got to the heart of things. Okay. And so, in fact, I think if you were to sit down and ask people who have sat under my preaching now over the past couple of years, they would say there is a major difference in Josh. Major difference. Yeah. And it all is centered around the personal time that I've been spending with God. Yeah. And now in the pastoral world, what it comes from is I don't preach from a place of deficit where the well's always empty. Yeah. Now I preach from a place of overflow. Yeah. Where you stand up and you just go, okay, Lord, just pour through me, whatever, because I've been spending that time with you, and just speak,
I love it.
And that's all this stuff that we're talking about. Yeah. I mean, these are all habits and mindsets and different changes that have taken place. And that's why I wanted to have you on, because I think what you do is so helpful to people. Yeah.
Well, and that's a testament to you created a habit that led to a transformation. So you were already a pastor. You were already leading people to Jesus in the relationship, but you transformed to a new level even in that by adding this habit. So I'm curious, what is that habit? How much time do you spend? Is there a certain scriptures you look for? Is there a certain devotional that you do? What does that look like?
Yeah. So the thing that I do every single morning is I have one chapter in the New Testament, one chapter in a wisdom book, which is Psalm, Proverbs, Song of Solomon, and then one chapter in the Old Testament. So I don't have, this isn't my Bible that I use at home, but basically, so I know every single day where I'm going to be the next day.
Yep.
And I write a little asterisk mark next to every chapter. So right now I'm in Genesis 30, I'm in Psalm 20, and I'm in 2 Timothy chapter 1.
Yeah.
So that's my current, right? So because one thing I learned about myself, and you can apply this for going to the gym, you can apply this for reading your Bible, you can apply this for your devotion. If you wait till that moment to decide what you're going to do, you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Because you're like, well, I don't know, I just won't do it. But if I already know tomorrow exactly when I wake up in the morning what I'm reading, what my devotion is, what the chapters are, then I leave my Bible out and boom, I pick it up and I go with it, right?
Right, yeah.
And so I had another guy who asked me, really, it's only one chapter? And I was like, well, there's some times when I'll go further than that and I'll read some other, read beyond that. But that's my minimum.
Yeah.
That's each morning that I have there. And then, you know, I'll write out different things. 2 weeks ago on the podcast, I had a guy on named Mark Cook. And Mark shared that he was having a tough time with his prayer life. So he said what he did was he had a book called Prayers That Avail Much that has a whole bunch of prayers by, I believe, Jermaine Copeland is the writer of that book. Came out a long time ago. And it's just prayers that she wrote out for every single topic you can think of. Forgiveness, hurt, joy, friendships, like anything you can think of.
Yeah.
And Mark said he just would read, when he didn't know what to pray, he would just read that, like pick a prayer and read it.
Right.
And made that his habit. So that's what I do in that, if that answers your question.
No, that's great. And I want people to hear too and just say, don't just adopt your reading routine because it works for you. And I think that's for anything. Don't adopt my fitness routine or certain routines. I think it's all testing what works for you. For some people, depending where you're at, it's just get in the habit of opening your Bible and find one scripture and read that, focus on that. Maybe it's there. But I do agree. There's a couple of things that came up for me, and this definitely applies to the Bible, but I remember hearing a quote where a guy talked about he reads one book over and over. And he said, I don't read through this again because I see something different. I see something different because I'm different when I read it.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely true of the Bible. As we go through, new things are revealed to us because we are transformed. And so new things start to show up. But then I was also thinking, so the first time I read through the Bible cover to cover, I just read it like a book, cover to cover. And there was times I felt like I was just checking off the box because you get in, whether it's Numbers or Chronicles, and you're just kind of reading through, and it's like it's tough just to get through it like you're reading a book.
Yeah.
But the best way I did it was finding a reading plan that had, okay, you're going to read some Old Testament, New Testament, Psalms or Proverbs. And by doing it like that, it was much easier for me to stay on track and to really spend time with the Lord. Just felt versus I feel like I'm just reading it through just to say I've read the Bible, if that makes sense. Because I definitely wanted it to be a devotional, but if I felt like I just had to show up because I'm just going to hold myself accountable, I'm just going to do it, it took away from why I'm doing it, to actually spend time with the Lord. But knowing that, it made it so much easier for me to do it. And I felt like I got so much more out of it by doing a plan that did mix it up like that for me.
Yeah. And the reason why for me, the thing that I'm doing works is because it's just always different. So I don't go straight through the New Testament.
Right.
I'll finish one of the books and then go, what's the next one?
Yeah.
I don't just go to what the next book is going to be. I might jump over. If I'm in 2 Timothy, when I finish that, it might be Acts, which is the next book.
Yeah.
And you kind of keep that fresh. And the other reason why I do only one chapter in each is because I have a study Bible.
Yeah.
And instead of just reading it to get through it, so I don't have a plan to get through it in a year.
Right.
I just have a plan to keep reading.
Yep. Showing up.
And each time if I just do one chapter in the study Bible, I can read all the notes of what each of the verses in that chapter mean. So I read that as well.
Yeah.
So I'm not just reading the chapter. I'm actually getting out the shovel and like digging deep into the chapter.
I love that.
And that's where it goes back to the preaching thing when people say, well, there's something different. People are nice. Pastor Josh, you've always done a good job. They're sweet, but now they go, now we're seeing a difference.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the principles I teach people is listen for insights, not information. Because there's so much information out there. You're listening to this podcast, listen for the insights, not just the information. So the last thing we need is just another podcast, another book to read, things like that. But something will speak to you.
Yeah.
And I like those Holy Spirit moments, right? God is like, no, you need to focus here. The same people could listen to the podcast and all get different things from it. This one thing spoke to me. That one thing spoke to someone else. Whatever speaks to you, God's giving you that insight for a reason.
Yeah.
So stay there. And that's why I love what you do with the Bible. You go deeper right there. Because it's easy. If you just showed up for a reading plan, I'm just going to read here to here. Okay, I'm done. Versus, no, I'm going to stay right here and I'm going to go deep. You get a lot more insights from that. And then I think when God gives you the insights, they're not just for you. They're one for you to act on, but for you to share with other people too.
Yeah.
Because I think that God gives us insights that we're supposed to bless other people with.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell me, as we kind of bring this to a close, tell me some things that you do. You mentioned some coaching. You mentioned some retreats and summits, you called it. Like, what are some things you do that you connect with people and how they can connect with you?
Yeah, main thing right now is the content that I put out. Because I'm in a season, I do coaching, I run masterminds, and I've done the corporate things, speaking, doing a lot of stuff. And I've kind of niched down to I help chiropractors. Being a chiropractor, I help do a lot of coaching of chiropractors. So I'm kind of shifting gears I'm giving my stuff away for free. So through my content, the stuff that I'm putting out, I just want to help people. I don't need to coach someone and have a money exchange for that. I'm like, no, God's called me just to, if he's giving it to me, I want to give it to others. So follow me, Instagram. You're going to see a shift in my content too, because God's given me a platform. And now I'm at this place of like, I want to use it to glorify him even more.
That's awesome.
Because I don't want it to be about me. And I kind of have slowed down because I'm like, I don't want it to be about me. Yes, it's me and my brand, but I want my brand to point to him. So I'm going to be putting out a lot more of, and I already do weave because my faith is who I am. So it's already there, but I'm going to be more intentional of actually preaching the gospel through my content as well.
Yeah, that's great. So do you have a website?
Yep. So drjustinmoseley.com is my website, or mindshiftlinks.com. I have a lot of free resources there as well.
Okay. And then the podcast that you do, is it a weekly podcast?
Yep. So weekly podcast, the Mindset Doctor podcast. So you can find that anywhere you get your podcasts as well. And I'm going to be interviewing you soon. We got to get that on the books, and Nick Hyder, some other great people too.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. And so are you going to continue to do retreats or getaways or what do you think?
I'm open to it. Yeah. And they've kind of tailored, I speak at a lot of other people's events now too. So that's kind of where I love doing my own, but I love new audiences. People bring me out to speak at their masterminds, speak at their conference. So I'm kind of, right now, I'm open to whatever the Lord brings me. Even this just happened in January. I was going to an event. My buddy runs a speaking event, and I do a lot of speaking. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go to this event. The day before, he messaged me and said, what's your intention coming to this event? And I said, well, right now I'm just in the place that I want to glorify God with my voice. And so I sent him that through a voice note on Thursday night. Friday morning, I was interviewing a guy who's a mentor of mine. And pre-COVID, he's an evangelist. And pre-COVID, he was going over to Pakistan, Uganda, all these places where you preach to 100,000 people in the field.
Wow.
And see lots of people give their life to Christ. So seeing some cool stuff. But then in post-COVID, he couldn't go over there anymore. So they started doing it virtually. And now he does over 150 virtual crusades a year where he's just preaching through Zoom, and he's got a translator, and people are giving their life to Christ. So the next day after saying, I want to use my voice to glorify God, I interview him. And at the end, he says, I'm just in this season where I want to raise up other evangelists. And so I started sharing my heart where I am. And so now there's a potential, I'm working with him where I'm going to start preaching at those other places, Pakistan, Uganda, different things. He's got a TV show that runs in Pakistan 24 hours a day, just preaching the gospel. So that's something new and exciting that I'm looking forward to.
It's very exciting.
So yeah.
Very cool. Man, could you have imagined coming out of that river all those years ago that this is where you'd be and the stuff you'd be doing?
No, yeah, I never would have thought that. And that's where, it's a mindset thing. We limit ourselves because of the stories in the past, and we want to limit ourselves. But it's like, no, with God, what is possible? And that's one of the questions I ask myself: what is possible? And that's right now. I want to do stuff that's so big that people look at it and like that has to be God, because there's no way he could do that on his own.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm going for now.
Love it. All right, drjustinmoseley.com. And then what was the other one?
Mindshift Links.
Mindshiftlinks.com?
Yep.
Okay, great. So look him up and check out his podcast as well, The Mindset Doctor. Yeah. And really appreciate you coming on here. Enjoy this.
Yeah, it's fun.
We could do like 4 episodes with
I know,
this stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I really appreciate it. So anyway, thank you to Dr. Justin Moseley. Please go and check him out at his websites, and really appreciate you. So we'll be here every week with a new episode, and tell your friends and family about this. And we're doing this here because we want to help people. We want to spread the good news of Christ and have these awesome conversations. So we will see you next week.